Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Ankerstar Wealth Market Update. I'm your host, Allison Ankerstar, and today we'll be talking about Steve's history on March 21st, 2003, dropping the first bomb of shock and awe, the relative calm in the markets, and the latest Boeing 737 crash. But before we begin, as a reminder, this is a financial education presentation should not be construed as personal financial advice. Full disclaimer information is available at ankerstarwealth.com. Good morning, Steve. March 21st is a big day in your personal history. What can you tell us about your role in shock and awe?
Good morning, Allison. Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody had a good spring break week if you are here in Texas at least, and enjoying March Madness, quite the craziness that's going on. But I will tell you my own March Madness story from 2003. Again, is my shock and awe story. Many of you have already heard it, but I will just kind of briefly cover. Many of you know, but I was able to, got my jersey number called, if you will, a number of years ago when I was active duty to fly the F-117, which I have the model here. Maybe you can see it, maybe you can't. It's the with the silly screen on, anyhow, you can't really see it. But it's the black triangle looking fighter jet, and got called to go in and drop the first bomb of the shock and awe campaign. Secretary Rumsfeld was the one who came up with the shock and awe terminology. And again, it was the first 72 hours when we went into Baghdad, at least with the air war, we were going to keep them awake and in shock and awe for a 72-hour period. And then the ground forces will be able to flow into Baghdad at that point. He even said at one point, we'll be met with open arms and, chocolates and flowers. And I'm not sure anybody got chocolates or flowers from the people that we just bombed. The history books have talked about the strategy being an interesting one. But certainly from my perspective, as any warfighter's perspective, when you get called to do something, you go in and you do your best, even if the strategy is like, well, I don't really see how this is going to work, but you go do your best anyway. As far as if you're interested in the full story, obviously it was an opportunity for me to be just a small part of history. Luck and timing play a large part of it, and then when preparation meets opportunity, that's when things can really go your way. I will say that I've given many interviews on this particular sortie that I flew. This little part of history, it was featured in the book Operation Cobra 2, talks about the whole air campaign, and I've been there by name for a couple of times. But if you want to hear more, probably the best interview is on the David Johnson show. So I show this if anybody wants to go get the full interview. This is actually within the past 6 months, where David flew me out to Phoenix, Scottsdale specifically, to a studio out there. And David has a fantastic podcast. If you're into podcasts, listen to David. He finds unique military experiences. Most folks that have been in the right place at the right time in history to tell their story. And I was fortunate enough that we came across each other through a mutual friend, and she said, you definitely have to have him on your show. And David's like, I agree. So if you want to, it's on YouTube. I also, if you want to hear me just tell the story through some slides and things, go to my YouTube channel, and the same one that this goes on every day. You have to go all the way back though, so just Google it. And it's actually episode 1 of my podcast where I tell the story as well. So if you're interested, if you're interested in hearing more, that's where you can find out about it. But really cool to be part of history. Again, that was Irene and I were dating at the time, so weren't even married yet. And then of course, Allison came around not just more than a year later. So it was really an interesting time in our lives.
Next, the stock market futures are relatively calm this morning after a huge move up last week. What does this mean for this week?
Well, yeah, when you look at the futures this morning, excuse me, when you look at the futures this morning, it's relatively muted. And we when there's a war raging, if you will, or a conflict raging, if you want to call it that, because technically it's not a war, it's a war to the people involved, obviously, but it's more of a conflict as far as it hasn't torched off into anything larger than just the two countries and people supporting both sides. So but you see markets tend to react. They tend to react big on Fridays because people want to take risk off. So that generally leads to some selling on a Friday. And then of course, Monday mornings, you have 2 days worth of information to price in. And that's why you generally see large moves on Monday. So I say that this morning's market action being fairly calm is a really good thing. I think people think that everything with the, not everything, but for the most of the Ukraine-Russia conflict is priced in on how it's going to affect the economy. Obviously, the Fed last week spoke very clearly as to, they raised their interest rate a quarter point. They also spoke very clearly as to their game plan for the year. So markets like certainty. So that's why you saw 4 straight days up last week. And, today I would imagine we'll start a little bit in the red. And I think we will, end up kind of leaking up, if you will, throughout the week. So again, best week since 2020. You see the tagline there at the top, but I think it's a really good sign that the bottom is in for the markets for the short term, at least.
Last, a Chinese Boeing 737 reportedly crashed last night, marking the third major 737 crash in 4 years. Is the aircraft still safe, and how will this affect Boeing stock?
Well, obviously there are some issues with the 737 out there, and it's interesting because Allison and I are on an airplane tomorrow, a 737. If you know that Southwest, their entire fleet is 737s. There's different versions in there, obviously, and the problems have been kind of tied to certain versions. 737 MAX having some issues. This was not a 737 MAX, so 737-800 was that's the initial information anyway that we're getting out of this story. But you can see the story here on CNBC, if you will. So kind of a smaller load of folks on the airplane. 737-800 dropped out of the sky from 29,000 feet. Obviously you're going to lose everybody in a situation like that. So shares are down a little bit. We'll talk about aviation first. Am I an aviation expert? No, even though I did spend 20 years in the industry. It was on the military side. But no, I don't have any concern whatsoever on getting on a 737 or any other US based airline. I really don't at all. Now, and I really don't even have concerns over the foreign airlines, but I would kind of stay with the people, names you've heard of, if you will, as far as flying around. But the US, specific to the US, the aviation industry is one of the most, I'm knocking on wood here, but, just one of the most amazingly safe means of travel that you can have. I mean, the latest major crash here in the US was 2009, right? So, and again, there were some issues with the crew on that airplane. There were lots of lessons learned, and it changed some aviation rules. But these things just don't happen very often, and next to never in the United States. So I have no problem at all flying around the 737. I know Boeing's obviously completely vested in making sure their airplanes don't crash. So everything will be investigated. There will be, the cause of the crash will be known. There will be several actions taken based off of it. And, you can't rule out, air crew error either, because that's generally at least part of it involved in crashes. We'll see. Well, we don't know what happened here, but obviously this parlays over into Boeing stock, which I like Boeing because really you have two ways to win, right? 2 ways for it to go up. You have the commercial side of Boeing, which is the 737, as well as the other 700 series that they have out there. And then you also have the military aspect of it and everything they're involved with on the military side. So you can kind of see, the big move down initially. It's kind of climbing its way back up. If you were in trading at 5:30 in the morning Central, you could have gotten a heck of an entry price on Boeing. So I think Boeing starts to recover today. I don't think overall it's going to affect the stock that much.
Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Please submit your questions as a comment through social media or directly to our email at vipservices@ankerstarwealth.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe to get daily updates. That's all we have for today's show. I'm Allison Ankerstar, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.